Welcome to Triptych.
Three friends having a chat
about three artistic masterpieces,
making connections for modern life. Welcome. Hello, Joel.
Hey, what's going on, Mark?
Hello, Sophie.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. Well, here we are.
Apparently we're here.
Slick.
We're getting so much better at this.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, well, after those niceties, this time we're going to think about books we started but couldn't finish. So a bit of confessional this time. Who's going first?
I'll go first then. So I started but couldn't finish the Gormenghast trilogy by Mervyn Peake. And I felt like I would really enjoy this because, you know, it's kind of like slightly absurdist fantasy, like slightly Dickensian. So everything I'd heard about it felt like I would enjoy it. But I was just kind of really bored and I just could not care for the characters at all. And the kind of long-winded rituals, which I think I was supposed to find amusing, I just found boring. So it disappointed me, and maybe I'll come back to it at another later time in my life. But as it stands, Gormenghast was a no for me.
I haven't read it. I've heard similar things. I don't even intend to try.
For me, I'd heard great things about Samuel Beckett's play Waiting for Godot. And so I think my mother-in-law had a copy, so I grabbed it and I tried. I got tired of waiting, I think. I just didn't get it, really. I mean, and it's supposed to be brilliant. It supposedly revolutionized the play industry. I just did not get it. I was like, okay, this one is clearly above my head. And you know what? I don't need to put myself through this.
That's fair. Although it'd be interesting. Would it be different if you saw it rather than read it?
Maybe, yeah.
Although, of course, nothing happens.
Yeah, I think it's maybe harder to read something where nothing happens than to watch nothing happening. I don't know.
For me, this is a bit of a confession. I've tried George Eliot's Middlemarch 3 times. And I know it's amazing. I know the general plot, and I know it's just incredible, and people think she's the greatest thing since Great Things. I've tried, and maybe one day, but it just didn't happen. 3 times I tried, and I just couldn't.
3 times. I mean, that's a good effort.
I tried.
I'm amazed you tried 3 times.
Yeah, well done.
It was guilt, basically.
Okay,
and
sense.
Then despair.
Yeah, famously excellent motivators for reading literature.
I think so, yeah. I was taught that at school anyway. Right, moving on.
My masterpiece is the film Godzilla -1. So, confession, look, for most of my life, I didn't appreciate the artistic value of a monster destroying a city. You know, it's like I keep thinking Calvin and Hobbes when he does his little sketches with he's a monster destroying things. But Godzilla -1, I mean, I think a few years ago, I started getting into the whole franchise and watching a few films. Godzilla -1 felt like something entirely different, though. It's set right at the end of World War II. Japan is losing the war, and it's like it's known that this war is going to end. They're going to surrender. It's it's not going well, and cities are destroyed, have been destroyed. The country is devastated, and the story centers on a kamikaze pilot who was supposed to fly his plane into maybe a ship or something like that, and chickened out, and instead lands on an island where his plane is supposed to. It's a maintenance island where they fix the planes and send them back out for the people to die. But they start to realize nothing's wrong with his plane. What happens that night is Godzilla shows up, and he's encouraged by one of the mechanics to attack this monster. He freezes, he doesn't do it, and everybody but him, and his name is Koichi Shikishima. How well did I do that?
Very well.
All right, okay.
Very good.
Let's just not have any Japanese people listen to this podcast, just in case. It wasn't as good as it sounded to your ears. So Shikishima fails to attack Godzilla. Godzilla just kills everybody apart from Tachibana, who is this one mechanic and who blames him for this and already was looking down on him for not doing his duty. But as the story progresses, they go back to a devastated Japan. Everybody's lost a lot. What I loved about this story is that it felt like Godzilla was not the main character. It felt like what Godzilla was doing was not the center of the story, but was almost the backdrop to a very affecting human story about loss, about guilt, about how do you move on with life? And can you move on with life after that kind of trauma? And this man, even though he's gifted a new family in so many ways, is unable to receive that gift. And the backdrop of war and a war-torn country was particularly affecting watching it again with what's going on in the world now as compared to a few years ago when I watched it, and just the nearness of war and feeling that devastation again, and the collective sense of loss and grieving. As the story progresses, you see him wrestling with this, and he's developing friendships. Life is coming back, but here comes Godzilla again, and Godzilla is now bigger. How would you say? Bigger, better,
Worser.
Yeah, worser. Yeah, he's been transformed by the nuclear testing on that the U.S. did at Atoll Island, and he's now attacking Japan. And now Shikishima is kind of forced to confront this demon from his past. And what's he going to do? How is this going to work? The themes of loyalty to country and government, and just how the government can behave. I thought it was amazing how much these themes are right on the surface of the story from the very, very start. It wasn't subtle in many ways. It was just, it felt true to life, because when you're living through that, everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody is wrestling with how is the government dealing with the war? How is the government dealing with the aftermath of the war? How is the government dealing with this new crisis? How do we feel as people? And just watching them wrestle with that, and then watching the community come together to fight this new threat, how they approach that, how the relationships worked out, and further loss and further devastation. And you're seeing the characters develop.
Well, I loved it. I loved the World War II setting. And I like what you said about it. Godzilla isn't the kind of the main feature in that sense. He is the backdrop in human stories. And I think that's what I really loved, because I'm not a massive kind of monster franchise kind of gal. I know, shock
Really?
horror. But I know, crazy, right? But I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed how the kind of the themes of kind of shame and honor were exacerbated by the Japanese setting, and the sense that he has so much guilt over not being able to fulfill his duty as a kamikaze pilot. And then that's compounded with this survivor's guilt from the Godzilla, the first attack he experiences on the island. And then when he goes back, he's just so full of shame because he's just failed at every level. And it's not just him that thinks that, it's also part of his community. So like when he goes back, he meets his neighbor, Samiko, this lady who, when she kind of realizes he was a kamikaze pilot and failed in his duty, she's just like, why did you bother coming back? You're a disgrace. He has this sense that he just can't allow himself to live. Which is what kind of leads him to kind of want to do battle again when Godzilla shows up with all of this extra trauma and this sense that it's his duty to sacrifice himself and to make it right this time. So I thought that was a really, really fascinating way of kind of dealing with like a monster. It was very whimsical. I felt like I love Studio Ghibli like cartoons, like the manga. And it did feel like I was kind of watching a live action Studio Ghibli, because a lot of the emotions are quite overstated. And I don't know if that's just a kind of like a tenet of like that style, like it's like live manga, but like a lot of the expressions are extremely exaggerated, and they were kind of amusing but sweet. Yeah, so I just really enjoyed it.
Like the boat crew that he's with. I mean, they're
so funny.
I couldn't work out whether this was of Amdram, so amateur dramatics.
Yes.
So they're used to being on stage, but they haven't quite toned it down for the film. I don't know, but anyway.
But it was consistent though. So you kind of, after a while, you figured, okay, this is how they've chosen to portray the characters. And it did feel like a throwback to how acting would have been.
Yeah, that's a good point. I confess that I've never seen a Godzilla film before. I think I saw some silly cartoons or stuff. So I was pretty skeptical about this suggestion. I have to say, Joel, I was judging you and drawing all kinds of conclusions.
Well, confession is good for the soul, but bad for the reputation. So,
Will you forgive me, brother?
Oh, absolutely. We've been judging each other throughout this whole thing. So.
Yeah. This is one big exercise in judgment.
Yeah, but I was just blown away. I was really affected by it. Emotionally.
Same.
The big headline things at the end of the Second World War were Hiroshima and Nagasaki, obviously. But from what I've read, actually far more devastating was the firestorm that just completely razed Tokyo. And I think more people were killed in that, which just shows how extraordinary and the level of horror and destruction that Japan faced. Actually, probably the biggest character was not Godzilla, but was a devastated Japan somehow. And the different characters represented different ways of trying to come to terms with that, which was remarkable. Now, I wonder if this film had been made not in the 2010s or 20s, but made in the 1960s, would it have been as raw as that? Maybe, I don't know. That really did affect me. And then, of course, you get this in this thrown together little family that isn't a family.
Yes.
And that is very affecting indeed. So I think it was remarkably microscopic for something that is on a just colossal scale in every conceivable way. And that's how it gets to you, I suppose.
Just from the perspective of how they told the story, how much of the story is set in his little home as it recovers, kind of living in the rubble. And then you're watching plants sprout again. And I found that fascinating. I probably recognized it more the second watching because I watched the color version. The very first time I watched it.
Did you think it was a different film?
I thought the main version, or the version I watched just when the first time was Godzilla -1 minus color. So they had taken it and just stripped all the color out of the movie, but kind of kept the textures and enhanced all of that. So it was quite affecting.
I bet that was so effective.
Yeah, it was very, very well done. And I'm not one of these people who will just kind of watch black and white films for nostalgia. I'm kind of like, no, I actually like color. But this time around, I noticed things I didn't necessarily see as much in the black and white version, like these green shoots among the rubble as time is passing. And you're watching this, as you say, very small story happening, focusing on this one man and this family that's being built around him. And even with the friends that he develops on the minesweeping boat, they come to his home. And the dialogue is taking place there. And I thought that was just interesting, just kind of seeing the slow recovery from this devastation. And life is starting to grow again. But this man who can't allow himself to live.
I think the interplay between shame and guilt, maybe we can come back to this, but that's fascinating because they are different things.
Yeah.
And the caricature of the East is it's a shame culture. Now, I don't know whether we talked about this here, but I don't think such a thing exists. I think it's shame-oriented or guilt-oriented with one that's prevalent, but they don't count each other out. And I think what was so interesting about, what was his name?
Shikishima.
Koichi. That's his first name.
You're on the first name basis.
I'm on first name terms, and that name is much easier to say. So
it is.
More fool you. But the fact that he's wrestling with both of these things, which made without spoiling plots, made the conclusion so much sweeter.
Just with the redemptive feel, I felt like the whole film, it felt like a redemptive story for Japan. Like,
Yes.
It's almost like this is their way. Like, this was a way of, at the end of the war, them they had so much kind of shame over the failure of the war, and also then the way that the government had been. And then when Godzilla shows up, it isn't the government who takes action. It's all the people joining together who kind of collectively band together. And it's just like redemptive story of like the people coming together to reclaim
People
and
power.
rescue. Yeah, so reclaim and rescue their land. And it was like a
People
really
have the
beautiful
power.
thing.
Okay, whoa.
Too much?
Yes.
Okay, right. Right, we'll come back to that then. Okay, moving on.
masterpiece is the graphic novel called Please God, Find Me a Husband by Simone Lia.
You said that really urgently.
Please God, find me a husband.
Well
I
done.
already have one of those, so I'm okay. Like, one is enough for a lifetime, to be quite honest. And it was published in 2011 by Jonathan Cape, which is part of Random House, which I love, again, that this is a major publication taking this on, because it's a very whimsical, semi-autobiographical memoir style graphic novel of Simone Lia and her desire at the time to be married. And so the graphic novel, it opens up with, we meet Simone in 2007 walking through Leicester Square, and she's just thinking about how the previous week she's been dumped by email by the guy that she was dating.
It's a low blow.
Yeah, it's such a low blow to be dumped by, she was like, stupid email. And she feels miserable and humiliated, and she's literally envisaging herself in her mind as some kind of Victorian spinster, like replete with the spinning wheel. And she's like, that's it. And she stares at the sky and decides to ask God for help. And she kind of does this extended little kind of ranty monologue, including this bit where she goes, well, to cut to the chase, God, I'm going to be 34 in 2 weeks' time. And if you want me to marry someone, you're going to need to get a bit of a move on. And this is where you realise that the title isn't just being cute or casual or flippant. She is literally intending to include God in this whole journey and this whole adventure. And you can see throughout, it's her very sincere, unapologetic Catholic faith which informs her worldview throughout. But you also get to see what quite a quirky and funny individual she is. And so she does this prayer in Leicester Square, and her cartoon self says, oh, I didn't really expect a response. But then a nearby cafe starts cranking out Need You Tonight by In Excess, the 80s rock band, which kind of causes her surroundings to vanish. And you enter this kind of almost dream sequence in her hinterland where the trees have become the band and God is the singer singing Need You Tonight by In Excess.
God is Michael Hutchins.
Yes, to Simone, and they're singing, and like they end up dancing together as God is singing like You're One of My Kind. And it's quite hilarious and bizarre, but very touching. And okay, so we've got God depicted as like this old white man, which is a bit problematic on many levels. But you understand, you understand the kind of whimsy and the relational kind of aspect that she's trying to kind of get there. And I don't want to say it's like an imagined encounter. It's kind of a bit more akin to like magical realism, because it seems like a real thing that is kind of going on with her. And so anyway, the whole novel is about her embarking on this adventure with God. And she goes to God and presents her plan, because she was like, right, God, I want to have this spiritual journey with you. And she kind of envisages having a very exciting trip to Australia, meeting like a crazy old hermit who teaches her the secrets to holiness, having a near-death adventure, because she thinks that would be pretty good for her, and then meeting like a really impossibly hunky bloke who falls madly in love with her. And that's the plan. And it's actually quite familiar to any girl who grew up very religious and very imaginative. My diaries.
Really?
I'll say no.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
Is this your pen name?
yeah, this is my yeah, but it sounds very familiar, this idea for a very like extravagant mission trip culminating in meeting the man of your dreams. Yeah, but it's very funny because actually she initially ends up not in New South Wales at all, but just South Wales in the town of Carmarthen, which is not very far from where I'm from. And if you've ever been to Carmarthen, it's a very dull, grey, nondescript Welsh town, and yeah, it's raining. And so she visits her nun friends, and it's through this sequence that we actually get one of the most touching stories. It's where she's trying to meditate on the person of Christ to align her will with God. And she kind of dives headfirst into the story of Zacchaeus. But this time, Jesus wants to come to her house. And so we end up seeing adult Simone walking with Jesus, and they show up at her childhood home. And they go inside, and little Simone is in there, frightened and listening to her parents argue. And so you end up with the older Simone and Jesus comforting the little girl, and they end up playing a game of Operation with her, which is just, again, another hysterical moment. So I just love this because the whole thing really doesn't end with this magical ending, even though she gives you a fake out ending. It's all about the adventure with God. And I love the style of it, the very limited color palette. I loved the fact that it's kind of childlike, but not childish. And I thought it was just really groundbreaking because it wasn't like a really massive historical fiction like Mouse or a superhero style. This is just a normal woman with sincere faith who's a bit weird, who's allowing us into her story. So that was why I loved it.
Oh, really, Sophie? How interesting.
I know, right? What could the parallels be?
Well, I want to confess that I didn't feel comfortable walking around with this book in public. I just wasn't that interested in the conversations that would ensue.
It's not quite the Kingston vibe, is it?
No.
I just didn't know how to explain that
How do you explain that?
without a long paragraph, But I really enjoyed it.
Good.
I mean, I was struck by it's weird. When you watch somebody draw, as you said, it's kind of childlike, but not childish drawings, her depictions of herself. But then you see her depictions of the architecture.
Yes.
That struck me immediately. She put so much work into, it was Leicester Square, I think it was.
Yes,
and
so
the
much
shops
detail.
and the details. That created a kind of backdrop for this. I think it anchored you to reality, even though you're getting into this whimsical story, because all her environments were very, very carefully drawn with a certain type of precision without, going for ultra realism. I think her vulnerability was striking, and that held me throughout the novel.
Yeah, she's sincere.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how much was her and how much was her embellishing, but that vulnerability came out, that she didn't try to make herself more religious than she was, almost more effective in that era of her life. You're watching somebody struggle with her own beliefs and struggle with the practices she's embraced. And I thought, oh, that's so helpful to see. She can't even concentrate. It's like we're supposed to be thinking about Jesus.
She can't concentrate for 2 minutes.
And she can't concentrate. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I still struggle to concentrate in some of those moments. I'm supposed to be praying. I'm supposed to be reading the Bible. And my thoughts have gone somewhere else entirely. And you kind of bring yourself back. And I think that vulnerability really helped you to enter her inner conflict about her desire for a husband and just like, I'm trying to figure this out. Oh, yeah, let's grand adventure with God. Let's go on a grand adventure with God. When really the goal is a grand adventure with God that leads to a husband. And then the whole storyline around meeting this guy when she finally gets to the end of the world, as it were, the outback, and it's like, oh, and then he realizes that she's Catholic. It's totally unimpressed. It's like, okay, wow, I didn't see that coming. That was
totally. He's immediately like, oh,
yeah, like, okay, let's move on. No, let's just keep this going. And at a point, I think she told the story so well, I wondered how it would end at a point when they were now setting up this trip to meet and all of this. I was like, okay, that's weird, but okay, where's this going? But then to see what happened on that India trip and how she was now affected by the world around her rather than just her internal desires and her goals and dreams, but just kind of her eyes were open to life itself and to other people's suffering and situations. And I thought that also was so instructive.
I absolutely loved it, precisely because it's so mundane and personal. I was thinking about the whole business of depicting a relationship with God.
Yes, tricky, right?
Well, exactly. And it did occur to me that actually this is possibly the most convincing way of doing it visually, because there's something unreal about it, but something very genuine about it. If it was film, it would slide into kitsch and just weird stuff far too easily, and or just laughable. So how on earth do you find a visual language to depict this? And here's the thing that occurred to me just looking at it. If you look at the pictures of her when it's just her with God. I mean, you mentioned the problematic thing that he's a white man. Well, actually, I'm not sure he is. I think he's a white woman who looks like her.
He does. Yes, he does look like her. He's got the glasses.
So the glasses are the same. And you see
Yes.
this really clearly at the end when he's massive and she's tiny, or she's massive and she's tiny. So actually, in a way, I don't think it's problematic at all, because it's all about her being in the image of God and thereby perceiving, but also revealing something of God because of who she's made to be. So it's
Interesting.
actually very particular to her, and that's what makes it universal.
What I found interesting was that a lot of her dialogue with God was very one-sided. God is there, but God isn't necessarily saying much, and God is kind of speaking through songs that she's hearing, kind of thing. And I thought that's actually really very real. There's something mysterious about our relationship with God, where we're never quite sure, in that kind of dynamic sense, what we're hearing. Am I talking to myself?
Yes.
Is a lot of what's happening a reflection of my own thoughts versus God's thoughts? I mean, it was really funny, the scene after she had presented the plan,
Yes.
and then you have this panel with God just kind of laughing and then sighing, kind of.
Looking at the plan and be like, oh boy.
It's like, we've never been here before.
And I felt like, I'm sure I've done that with God before. It's just like, okay, God, here's what I have in mind. What do you think? I was like, oh boy. So I appreciated just, her portrayal of what really is so hard to wrap your fingers around sometimes. You are reaching out. You're really not sure what's happening, but you do have a sense that God is speaking to you in some of these ways. And I also appreciated just the involvement of scripture in her journey. Just these moments, again, where she's quoting a verse, she's in the scriptures, and she's saying, oh yeah, this is what I ended up thinking about, or this is what I'm wrestling with. And I was like, yeah, that's how it is for us. We are wrestling with God's word and trying to hear God in that.
My masterpiece this time round is, it's a sequence of sculptures. We haven't done much sculpture before. This is a sequence by a French sculptor called Bruno Catalano, which actually is an Italian name. His family is originally Sicilian. Catalano himself was born in Morocco, in North Africa, and they moved to France when he was 10 years old. And he's been a French citizen since. He was born in 1960. As a young man, he was in the French Merchant Navy for a number of years. So I don't know whether it was just around the Mediterranean or beyond, but he certainly traveled a lot. And he was a kind of third culture kid, so Italian extraction family living in Morocco and then leaving to go and live in France. And so experienced the never quite belonging, and actually the traveling work in the French Merchant Navy would have just exacerbated that. I guess it's a certain type who sort of relishes that kind of work, someone who doesn't have roots necessarily. And so, but he discovered sculpture and artistry, if you like, at around the same time he started in the Navy in his 20s. And then after leaving the Navy, I think the Merchant Navy, he was only in for up to 5 years or something. He set up a practice in Marseille, and that's been his base ever since. And of course, Marseille itself is a real sort of melting pot city, big major port, lots of people from all over North Africa, former French Empire countries, as well as other places, big port for the Mediterranean and so on. So this is all of background for his series of sculptures called Les Voyageurs, which means the travelers. It seems to be a sort of catch-all title. So we'll put in the show notes links to his website, and he's done a whole range of different sculptures in different cities. They're often outdoors, and they are life-size human figures in metal, but invariably they have a significant proportion of the body missing. There's just a gap. And so I think one of the first things that grabs your attention when you first see them is, how on earth is that standing up? So there's obviously a kind of internal spine that's holding it all up, but it feels kind of magic. So that I think draws you in. You think, what's going on there? And then you start looking at them. And they're often erected in ports along docksides. And so this means you're looking through these figures that might have one piece of luggage, a bag, or just an old suitcase, if that, maybe just some plastic bags. And they're often of mixed race or North African or sub-Saharan African. There's a whole range, but you're looking at this thing, you're looking through this thing, same size, same proportions as you or I, and there's something profoundly unsettling about them and provocative and yet incredibly moving. So maybe we can talk about, both the response to them, but what it might signify in our conversation. So how did they affect you when I sent you the photos?
Well, I think for me, I think the phrase I wrote to you is, what sorcery is this? Really, they don't look like they should be able to stand up. You're trying to figure out where's the hidden string kind of thing that's holding this thing up. But then at the same time, they interact so much with their environment because of that. That really struck me, that you're seeing not just the sculpture, but the place where it is from a unique perspective, because you're seeing through this person and kind of you're seeing all the photographs of them and the different angles, and you realize, oh, I'm seeing, whether it be the port itself and the sea or the architecture of the buildings behind. And that has a fascinating effect too, just in terms of marrying the sculpture with its setting where it's been placed. I also was struck by, the racial backgrounds of the characters he sculpted, and realized how rare that is. The details of dreadlocks, for example. I think here in Jamaica, we have a lot of sculptures of people of African descent, but kind of seeing that in a European setting was like, oh, wait, something's different here. And then the consistency with them having the bags. And of course, my French only took me so far in terms of the titles of the sculptures. And it's like, oh, but, I'm kind of piecing this together and realize, oh, this is about a journey. This is about traveling, and these are travelers. And what's the significance of that? So yeah, it's definitely just visually striking in a most unusual way. And then you wonder about the significance of the hollowness of the sculptures themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of saw these people as, I don't know, like walking wounded, like refugees, people fleeing something. That's kind of what I kind of took from it. Like the bag, they all have like one bag. And from that, I'm kind of reading into, this is their stuff. This is their worldly possessions. And they're leaving something behind. And because of that, they have this part of them that is being left elsewhere, hence why we can see through them, because they've left something vital of themselves that makes them whole behind in order to keep the rest of them alive and surviving. But I also really enjoyed about how often sculpture is often kind of seen for like classical works, and it kind of puts everything quite in the past, whereas like these ones, they're colored, the sculpture, because you can see the blue of the jeans that they're wearing and like the brown of the bag. It's fascinating. So that kind of puts it into this immediacy. It's like, it's not something that's happened in the past. This is not a commemoration for something that happened terribly long ago. This is something that's just ongoing and happening right now. And these are the people all around you.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that sculpture tends to be commemorative.
Yes, it does.
But this is contemporary and political and even prophetic, I would say. And picking up that prophetic thought, it's quite interesting that he did, I think, one of the biggest exhibits of his work in Geneva, around Lake Geneva. And of course, that's one of the wealthiest cities on earth, but it's also on the lake. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. And these statues, these sculptures were dotted around the city. And I think there's something really remarkable about that juxtaposition of these Swiss banks with who knows what in them, the world's dodgy money.
Usually.
Thanks. And other stuff. But then you have scattered around the city, you have these figures who basically have only the clothes they're wearing and a bag, but they're missing kind of their internal organs. They've missing their heart, their soul even. And it's just interesting. I don't know, I perhaps should look this up, but I don't know that in French there's the same idiom as there is in English, where you say, he looks straight through me. But whether or not there is, it fits perfectly to the idiom in English, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're looking straight through these people and not taking them seriously and not factoring who they are, but the cost that they've paid to be where we are.
Yeah. And I think, again, that kind of really is a contrast with like the opulence of the surroundings, with it being, in these kind of like big Western cities. And you've kind of, some of them have like amazing architecture and fountains behind them. And so you've got this massive contrast. And then you've got these people who are not even whole people and just with like very, very little. And it's this kind of contrast with like, actually, these people are all around us, but we don't pay attention to them.
We look straight through.
We look straight through them. Exactly that.
Yeah, and that sense of not belonging, I think, is emphasized by the kinds of people they are. They are here, but they don't fit here, and they've lost so much to be here. Yeah.
And as far as here is concerned, they don't matter. And different contexts around the world, but particularly Europe and North America, the rise of nationalism and the scapegoating of migrants and people, so even phrases like economic migrant is a difficult phrase because, well, okay, so what if they're economic migrant? If you know something about what they are emigrating from, that might make you understand that actually any of us would do the same. So I think these sculptures are remarkable for just stopping you in your tracks and making you just that little bit more empathetic, perhaps. We have Godzilla, we have someone desperate for a husband, and we have travelers with no heart and soul. This is a challenge, as our friend Bruno might say.
I am struck by setting in art and just how much of the story is told just by backdrop elements, how they affect how you're interacting with what's in the foreground. I mean, that's literally what you have with the sculptures. If you put these sculptures somewhere else, they'd tell a different story. But where they are in the world and then what they are comes together to talk about an issue, to tell a story, which is the sculptor's own story of migration and of loss and of you're carrying things with you, but you've left so much behind, and this lack of wholeness that he's experienced. And then setting also in Godzilla -1, the environment they're interacting with, the time it's set in, the physical environment itself, the devastation, it mirrors what's happening inside of the characters. They have lost so much. They are scarred. They are in pieces in many ways. But you're watching as life comes back. So
while you mentioned that, did we work out why it's called Godzilla -1? Does that mean there were two Godzillas before and one's gone off, or what's going on there?
We have one less Godzilla in the world.
We've lost a Godzilla.
What I read was just this idea that the war had already devastated Japan so much, so it's almost like you are already at zero.
Oh, okay.
And now this monster attacks, and it's like you're in the negative now.
Okay,
that was the idea
sense.
I read.
You thought it couldn't get worse, and then it does.
Exactly. Yeah.
Much like this podcast.
I hope not.
Well, I won't be telling Sophie
-1
now.
Yeah, maybe. Sophie,
you mean
maybe
that's that when Sophie is fired?
Yeah, I'm fired. Triptych -1.
Anyway, sorry. What do you have to say?
That episode was when Sophie takes a break.
Oh man, I'm just kind of thinking so the setting, it really informs the story for each of these ones. And when you were talking about, Joel, like the drawing within the Simone Lia story and how the backdrop really makes the whole thing come alive, and also kind of adds kind of humor to the story, the fact that she wants to go to this exotic New South Wales and Australia. She ends up in South Wales. Yeah,
It has a certain exoticism.
bit of a downgrade, so how that kind of really informs the story. I don't know, I'm thinking about the theme of being given permission to live. That's kind of what's in my head.
You just redeemed the whole podcast.
That kind of, sometimes, I don't know, do we give ourselves permission to live? Like, who are we looking for to give us that permission? Like in Godzilla -1, he doesn't give himself permission to be happy.
He's completely frozen, isn't he?
He's frozen. He just can't do that. And like, again, without kind of giving away the ending, it's really the opinion of the mechanic Tachibana, who he feels kind of duty bound to because of his shared trauma bond with and his failing. So he kind of needs him to give him permission before he will kind of even consider that. And I'm just kind of, I'm just thinking about how that works in like Simone's kind of journey for acceptance and trying to find a husband. It's almost like this adventure with God that she embarks on kind of gives her permission to live, to re-engage with the world. It gives her a different perspective. She doesn't find the man of her dreams in the book, but through a deeper relationship with God and a deeper understanding of who she is in the world, she kind of gives herself to permission just to kind of engage with the world as she is.
I mean, she has to realize, I mean, it's incredibly moving. I won't give it away, but it's incredibly moving when she finally says what God wants her to say.
Yes.
At the end. And that stopped me in my tracks, that moment. And that's why suddenly everything's okay, even if it's not this dream.
Even though the circumstances
right.
are unchanged.
But it struck me that in each of the three works, there's a deep lostness of identity and belonging. No one quite knows. So maybe I mean, that permission to live is a good way of putting it, but it's also, I don't know who I am, which is why I don't know where I fit. And each of them, particularly Koichi and then Simone and then the sequence of Les Voyageurs, each of them is kind of floating through this life without roots for all kinds of different reasons. But it's interesting that trauma is a bit of a thread.
Yeah, certainly living with loss for sure. And just, they're all portraits in different ways of living with loss. And I mean, of course, the sculpture isn't as animated as it were, obviously, you know. It's a moment frozen in time, but because it's located in a society and a culture, you realize, okay, yeah, here is someone living with loss. And then you start to wonder about the artist's own story. And how it's reflected in the work he has done in terms of his own sense of loss and belonging. And it's interesting how you end up with these three. Now, if you think of the sculptures as just a character, you end up with three characters that are surrounded by people, but there's a sense of isolation. There's a sense of aloneness.
Did you see the trio of sculptures together?
Yes.
Where basically it's like the guy is disintegrating, so that the third one, I think, is that you just see
just the bags
and maybe a bit of foot or something, but basically the body has disappeared, and it's just like he's been eroded by this new place, and it's agony. It does make me think of, even in our little town in England, this is a very small town, very insignificant in many ways, but, you know, the local Holiday Inn has been housing asylum seekers for the last several years. And we've got to know quite a few of the folk who've passed through there, and our church has had a number of people who've been able to get to know folks there, and it's been amazing. But it's pretty tough in there, and it just compounds the agonies that they bring with them, because they wouldn't be here otherwise.
And it kind of makes me think of, again, some of the solutions to that potentially, because, you know, we've got this permission to live kind of idea, but also the ideas of how found family works, you know, like these people are without their ideal setting. Like, so Simone is without the family, the nuclear family she wants, a husband and maybe kids. But we do see a life, and I think she starts to come to terms with a life that is rich in friendship and meaning, as you see the different, you know, the various people she's friends with and the girl that she travels with. And then in Godzilla, you know, he has this little family thrust upon him. They're not his choice. They're not the circumstances he'd want, but they do start to gradually bring meaning to him.
And he to them.
And he to them. Yeah, they all bring meaning and an anchoring to each other, having found each other.
And actually with Simone, towards the end, through her encounter with God, then she starts seeing people on the tube differently, and thinking
Love
about
that.
what they need. And so that is a very beautiful sort of pay it forward type thing.
Yeah. So, and we obviously don't see any of that kind of conclusion with these sculptures, because we see
No.
them in this moment in time, and they're in this moment of transition and loss. But you kind of wonder what might be in the future for them as they try and make their way, and the people that they find themselves amongst, you know. And I guess that's a challenge for us as well. Like, are we part of that solution for them?
Absolutely right. And isn't it interesting? And I'm just looking at it again. So in Simone's book, she says, back in London, I tried to put into practice some of the things that Sister Hilda had mentioned. And then there's a bloke hanging from the, holding onto the rail in the tube. And she says, on the tube, I imagined Jesus in the midst of the people blessing them. And I think the sculptures are kind of a number of steps before that, but it's kind of shaking us by the lapel and say, look at this.
Yeah, look at them.
Don't avert the gaze. Look. And then start thinking what they might need rather than how they might be, I don't know, undermining your quality of life or some rubbish like that.
Right. And that's what happens to Simone in India also. She starts to interact with people around her, and it starts to reshape her perspective on her own life and her own situation. And I think there's some similarities there in Godzilla -1, is because the way the community brings him out eventually. And helps him to overcome, his self-condemnation. And he's starting to recognize, no, but if we don't do something, more people will suffer. You know, I can't kind of be stuck in the suffering of the past and my guilt for what happened back there. This new situation demands me to come out of myself and move towards others. But then also that theme of self-sacrifice, which I think is... I think that's built into the migrant story of the sculptures, because even though you're being forced to move, you're also choosing to move. You've chosen to lose part of yourself in order to continue living. And here he has to get to the point where he's willing to die to save others. And that's when he's able to actually accept the invitation to live.
So I've just had a thought. So isn't it interesting, without giving the game away, but there's a very clear parallel between Koichi and Noriko in terms of sacrificing self out of love for the other, and how redemptive that is for both of them. And all kinds of sort of plot developments hinge on those moments of self-sacrifice. It's really fascinating. So it seems actually, I don't know, quite theological, and even Judeo-Christian theological, which you don't necessarily expect in, let's face it, a Japanese Godzilla movie.
For sure. Yeah, it's profound.
Well, we could go on forever. So let's go on forever. So what have, no. As we wrap this up, any sort of final thoughts of Convergence?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting how all three are these portrayals that help us to see people and to see people in their suffering, but how those stories of suffering, they at least announce the possibility of redemption, of some good coming from this. And even the presence of the migrant in a society that's struggling with their presence, that's just such a big part of the story of the world, and how we've gotten to where we are now. And it's funny how we love aspects of diversity, but we struggle with embracing other people in that way.
And isn't every nation a nation of migrants?
Right, exactly.
And I don't understand why that's allowed to be lost so often.
And I love each of these, like, they really do allow you to enter into the sense of loss and trauma. So I mean, with Godzilla and with Simone's book, we do have that kind of way in which we enter fully into their despair, but the message isn't to kind of shake yourself out of it and like stop being so selfish. It's actually, no, it's through the small moments of gentleness and connection with others and love that gradually turns our view outwards, you know? And so that's a really important way to frame it, to see that it is, you know, it's kind of in this community that we are healed and that we're able to look outwards. It's not a solo venture where we're able to kind of shake it off. We actually need others in order to be able to heal, and that should be the story for the Voyageurs as well, that they need others to enter their story to get more parts of themselves back again.
I mean, one would certainly hope that, and it's a provocation to current residents to wake up, really, isn't it? And actually, isn't it interesting? This is probably our most international episode in terms of topics. You know, Japan, New South Wales and South Wales, Marseille and Mediterranean, and travel and dislocation that comes from travel, and the need for other people, especially when you've been dislocated. It's very eye-opening, all of it. And who knew that was going to come out of some weird sea monster?
Who knew?
But we must wrap it up there. So this has been a joy as ever. So thank you so much, you two.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. It's goodbye from me.
And this is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. And next time, I can promise that we will be thinking about a book by Leif Enger called I Cheerfully Refuse. We're going to be thinking about a trio of songs by U2, which is the only band in the universe. And finally, a painting by Turner called The Fighting Temeraire. Until then, goodbye. That was Triptych, hosted by me, Mark Mennell, with Joel Bain in Jamaica and Sophie Kiddingley in the UK, with tech and editorial expertise from Owen Feetham. Visit our website at triptychpod.com, that is triptychpod.com, for episode show notes, background information and various links. Please do get in touch with any questions, comments and even suggestions for future episodes. And if you've enjoyed this, please do share it around and rate us wherever you get your podcasts.